Wilson had fallen in love with this woman that he hardly knew, and that he didn't know how to court her, because he was at the time he was president, and he had been, as I said, married to very loyally to a woman for 29 years, his wife, Ellie Axon, and he was a very devoted family man, and apparently, he was very devoted to his child. He didn't know how to go about courting a woman after his first wife died. He was basically a very, as I described last week, very, very lonely man in the White House after his wife died. He always felt comfortable with his wife, being with her, and that's all he needed. That was the company. He liked the company of women, of his wife and his 3 daughters. And he was satisfied with that. And he was but he did have we believe, maybe it's a platonic relationship with a woman from California, Mary Peck, and I think I mentioned Mary Peck, who apparently, he told his wife about. He met her while he was a Princeton University professor on a trip he took to the islands, the West Indies, and he befriended a woman who was a widow. She had been a widow, and then she was later divorced afterwards. She was a widow at the time, and apparently he felt very comfortable with her, and he notified his wife that I have become friendly with this woman in a platonic way. And he, well, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, but he wrote her about, hundreds of letters over the course. You're snickering, maybe you know something. Maybe you know something I don't know. Go ahead.
When someone invests that much of an effort, something's amiss.
But she lived in California, right?
Well, maybe you're right. If you believe that a man can't be friendly with
It's not a
women.
physical relationship. I could see his wife being upset about it by virtue of the fact that he invested that much time and effort into
Yeah.
But he told her about it, he wasn't trying to.
Not only that, he'd tell her about it. I'm not defending him. I'm not,
It's the emotional affair that happens before the physical.
Yeah, well, in any event, he was not attracted to her in the sense of marrying her.
Sorry.
Is that right? I'm going to close it. Sorry, I'm going to close the door.
Yes.
Although anyone else is welcome to leave or come. Let me just say this to you. Every letter that we know of, he gave to his wife. Every letter that he wrote to her and every letter she wrote to him was seen by his first wife. His wife that he was, but he invested. When she asked for $7,500, with the approval of his wife, he gave her $7,500, which was a lot of money in those days. And in any event, these letters were known, and it was known to his political enemies. His political people that were, but they didn't utilize it in his campaign. The enemies did not bring it up like they might bring it up today. Something like similar to Kennedy's affairs. They kept it quiet. Or Roosevelt's problem with his legs. They kept that quiet. They didn't really. When he ran for president in 1912. Now his wife passes away in 1914, and he's a very lonely man. He's not corresponding with this woman. He's not corresponding with this woman. This was a golden opportunity for her to come in, do the picture, and come to Washington and become his paramour, I guess. But she didn't. I mean, it was all well known, and he was very lonely there. And he didn't, for about, his wife passed away in August of 1914, and he had no contact with anybody except a few men that worked, close to him. His doctor, who he befriended, who had taken care of his wife, and then took care of him, and one or two other people. Other than that, he didn't have any need. He didn't have any, throughout his life, he never was friendly with many, he wasn't friendly with many men in terms of having a friendly relationship with men. And he didn't have any relationship with any women during that time. He was in grief. As I said last week, the whole world was falling, in many ways, all Europe was falling apart. And there was a time when his wife died, just at that moment the World War I started, in August of 1914. And he was on two different wavelengths. He was on one wavelength of taking care of things around the country, and another wavelength of complete desolation and despondency. He had no desire, and he was living a very miserable, lonely life as President of the United States when his wife died. He grieved for her tremendously. He basically, from August 1914 to March 1915, he was basically like a monk in terms of his private life. He basically just did nothing. At night after he did his work, he basically just he had the solace of his three daughters, but two of the three daughters had married and left, and his third daughter, Catherine, was still there. And I told you that the president's doctor brought him a woman to take his cousin, his maternal cousin, to take care of him. And she was a very quiet woman, and her relationship was to just be there for him. She loved him tremendously. But she got so despondent with his despondency. I told you this last week. She got so despondent with his despondency that the man who suggested that she come suggested that we find a friend for her. And who was the friend? I told you it was Edith Bowen Gall, who was 20 years younger than this cousin. She was 40 years old. She was a beautiful woman. And they started to become friendly. They started to take walks at Rock Creek Park, go to the library. She opened up to this woman as a friend. Finally, she suggested that she come back to the White House for tea, because Woodrow is out playing golf. One of his consolations, few consolations, is he took up golf with a doctor. He was not a very good golfer, but he kept every day he'd play golf to get his mind. And this doctor insisted that he play golf every day, even when he didn't want to. And he took the time every day to play golf. And it was a routine. So when she came to the White House at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a particular day in March of 1915, he wasn't expecting her. They go up to this private room, she's got mud on her boots. She wants to get changed. So they go up to this private, the lady's room to get her boots, and she bumps into her cousin, Woodrow, and the doctor suggests, and Woodrow is taken aback by her. He's looking at her, he says, I want to meet this woman. But he doesn't know how to talk to her. He hasn't been able to talk to people for 29 years. In terms of friendly, he's President of the United States. He doesn't feel comfortable in it. But he's stunned by her, and he doesn't let it be known. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, not even 3 or 4 weeks later, he proposes to her when she's calling him Mr. President. They've only met, every time they met, they were together with a chaperone, with his chauffeur, all of a sudden she comes, and the next thing you know, could you marry? And he says to her, the last 10 months, 8 months, are the loneliest months of my life. I feel each month is like a year. I've been terrible, and my wife has, my wife who I love, suggested that I should not be alone in this world, that I should find somebody else after. I would love that to be you. She turned him down, but didn't stop the relationship.
Well, thanks a lot.
And what happened was that she finally changed her mind about 2 months later, in September of 1914, and they agreed to get married. They agreed to get married, but now came up these letters that came from Mary Pack, who he hadn't seen, I don't know when, it was 5 or 6 years before the last time he saw her. And how did those letters come up? Because he was president of the United States, there was a good chance he wouldn't get reelected in 1916. I told you it was a fluke that he got elected in 1912 because of the division of the Republican Party, the Balloonist Party. And there was a good expectation that he would not get reelected. And they felt, his friends, his new son-in-law, who was Secretary of the Treasury, William McAdoo, and his good friend, Frank House, knew about these letters, and were afraid that if these letters came out, he would definitely not be reelected. Especially since he's dating. If he had just remained unmarried, there was a tremendous sympathy for Woodrow Wilson in the country. He being alone in the White House. Tremendous, and these people felt that if he ended up marrying within a year, actually it was more than a year, she died in August 1914, it's now September. If they ran for president in November 1916, he wouldn't get reelected because it was too soon after his wife's passing away. So they concocted a story to the President of the United States, his friends, not his enemies, that Mary Pack is trying to sell her letters to the highest bidder. The letters that he gave to, and Wilson says there's nothing to hide. I have done nothing to warrant this. I can't believe she would do that. I haven't been in touch with her for 5 years, but I can't believe she would do that. And what did he wasn't upset about? Not that they were exposed. He couldn't really care less about that. He couldn't care less what he really even got. He wanted to be reelected, but his main goal in life at that time, believe it or not, was to find love with this woman. This was he became a new man around her. He had been, as I said, in this state of tremendous desolation as president. He had the burdens of the world on him in his mind, and he had no one to talk to. And here was this woman who was coming into his life, and it turned him around. It made him a young Romeo. He was a very toha. But he said, I love this woman that Edith Bowen Gall. I can't expose her to this. I don't care if the world knows about what happened, but I can't put her in this position. So he writes, he called, now he's still got this formal relationship with her. Why am I bringing this up? I'm trying to give you a characteristic of Woodrow Wilson, because as I go along in this class, you're going to see that he was like the most important man in the first 50 years of the 20th century. Most important man in the first 50 years of the 20th century. What he did was, he was treated as if he was Jesus Christ by the world for a very short period of time. Always remember, November, what do we celebrate in November? How do you think the armistice came about? Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson stopped the war. I don't care what you say, Woodrow Wilson stopped the war. Because Woodrow Wilson, through timing, became a Christ-like figure to the vanquished and the victors who could not work together. He was a This is why I talk about this little thing about an affair, because I'm trying to show you how scared he is of exposing a woman and himself to rejection if she turns him down. And here is a man who, more than anybody else, up to the first 50, except, he's the one that basically stopped the war. Stopped the war. Not because he was great, but because he was put in a position of being a Christ-like figure to this war-weary world, which would have gone on probably for more years. Hundreds of thousands of American GIs would have been killed if it wasn't for the fact that he had found that the people looked to Wilson to stop this war. They were looking for an excuse, maybe, but they wouldn't have found it if it wasn't for Woodrow Wilson at the appropriate moment. Because Woodrow Wilson was the type of man that specifically looked at the world in rose-covered glasses. He believed that people could end wars. A war could be done to end all wars. He specifically believed that. How was World War I created? Through crazy alliances. Crazy alliances. There was not one country like there was in World War II, or one person that was trying to create a world leadership. It was an alliance of Germany looking to expand, and found Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. But basically they were trying, they said, we can't do this as a country alone. We're going to join an alliance. The purpose of the League of Nations, of the idea of a world conference, was to stop the thing that caused World War I, that might cause another war 30 years later. Well, and he was in some ways right, in some ways wrong. But he believed that this war of World War I, which was a monstrous war, caused more deaths than World War II, could have been stopped had there been an alliance. Had there been a league to stop these alliances from forming. Why did England join up with France? Why did France join up with, of all countries, this democratic France join up with this monarchist Russia? Why would France join Russia? And Germany fund Austria-Hungary? It was because if it was like a pick up sticks. You take one stick out, and the whole world crumbles. The alliances joined together and caused World War I. Yeah, I studied World War I to agree. World War I was an accident. Basically, no one knew that there would be a world war, except maybe Germany. But Germany was thinking, there was no one really thinking in terms of a world war. Germany's idea was to expand. Now, Wilson had really very little knowledge of human nature. He was an idealist. He was a rose-colored glassman. He had been a professor. Why am I talking so hard about his affair here? Because I'm trying to show you the strangeness of this man. This man that should be studied so carefully, because he created, in many ways, he created the concept of League of Nations, of a United Nations. World War II came about from World War I, and we stayed out of it, and we're going into that later. But basically, it was started by Woodrow Wilson, creating the ideal that people are not driven by animalistic forces, but that people can be created to keep peace for all time. Now, we've known better since then. We see that people, I know I've digressed over this, but I didn't want you to think I'm here to talk about Woodrow Wilson's affair. I'm trying to talk to you about his personality.
There was a book written by a Freudian history. He dealt with Freud's ideas, and he analyzed Wilson, and a lot of controversy because of that. Are you familiar with this? I don't know if you can say
No, I'm
something about
not,
that.
but I appreciate telling me about it. You want to talk about it?
No, I never read the book, but
Oh.
it did exist.
Yeah, well,
Big
there's
controversy because of it.
Right. I now am going back to this affair. With knowing now the background, maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, but I wanted you to see how important, to me, the contrast of a personality that could change the world, how he's involved, and he doesn't really, in 1915, he's not concerned with the world. In his mind, the League of Nations doesn't begin until after he's reelected in 1916. In 1915, he just wants to find someone to talk to and to love. And he's a very difficult man to talk to. He plays golf, but he's going through the motions. He doesn't have a confidant except for the Dr. Grayson, his own doctor. His doctor suggests that Edith Bowling-Gold be friends. The doctor doesn't think this is going to be fair. He brings the woman in to take care of the other woman. But he is like a susceptible schoolboy. He sees a beautiful woman who's 40 years old. To him, he's 59. This is a beautiful woman. And he says, I've been rejuvenated. My wife is permitting me, told me on her deathbed, the last thing she said to me is find another woman to love. Very pecky. He's not interested in her. But now these letters are exposed. So he says, I don't care if they find out about it. I have nothing to do with it. I have nothing to hide. I told my wife everything. But I don't want to talk to Edith about it. And I can't put her through this. And I won't get reelected. And she's going to... So he writes a letter that he can't get up the nerve. Here's a man who changes the world. He can't get up the nerve to call her and say, these letters mean nothing, but there were letters out there that are going to be exposed. He writes her a letter in which he tells her, and he sends his doctor friend, Dr. Trainer, like John Alden. He tells the doctor friend, send this letter to Edith and get a reply from her. Now Edith, she's a woman about the world. She's 40 years old. She's been around. She hasn't had a relationship with him, but she's been around. She's a widower. She's a rich woman. I told you that last week. A rich woman who ended up being poor when she was growing up and married the right guy who died, a jeweler. And she's unlike his first wife, who's got fancy clothes, has been around town, and she looks at this letter and says, what difference does it make? Of course I'll write him a letter. That means nothing to me. So she says, he wants me to write a letter back? So, stupidly, she puts it in another, she figures the doctor doesn't know, so she seals the letter. She gets an envelope, wait a minute, I'll get an envelope. For Woodrow's eyes only. And she writes in there, I couldn't care less, for love only, I will marry you. I love you, this means nothing to me. Now, this is in April. This isn't, I'm sorry, they got engaged in September. This is October, November, October. He gets the letter. Now it's October 1915. Doctor comes back with the letter sealed. Here's the man. He can't open the letter. No, this is true. He can't open the letter.
It's not that long.
What? He puts the letter in his pocket. He's afraid of rejection. And he gets sick. And he ends up with 102 temperature. And it's been 5 days. Right? Finally, the letter's still sealed. He's on his deathbed. The doctor goes running back to her and said, Woodrow's very sick. He's got 102 temperature. He can't do anything. I don't know whether he got sick because he couldn't open the letter, or he just got sick, but he refused to open the letter. Because she didn't tell the doctor, I love him anyway. She said, here's a letter for him. And he goes in. Finally, he's lying like this in a half-conscious state, and she comes up to the room. She grabs his hand and says, I love you, I love you, I love you. He looks up at her, and he says, thank God! And 102 goes down.
98 points.
This is the man who's going to be the man that changes the world. So now she takes up golf. She makes it consistently. He doesn't care about that. That she's. And the three are, and now, you know, they set the wedding, and in October 4th or 5th, they announced the engagement to the world. Now most people, very happy. There are some people that are griping. What is he getting married for? You know, it really wasn't that big a deal. People in those days always remarried. There was always a wife dying or a husband dying. There was always somebody dying in the family. But they had to prove that he didn't know her till after his wife died. You know, there was this rumor. It never was. You know, he didn't know her at all. She wasn't in politics. She wasn't in anything. The thing is, though, that they now have a one-to-one communication. He's on the phone with her, or you know, he's on the new phone. The phones that are he's on it, you know, all the time with her. And 2 days after the engagement, he's not worried about it, but he takes her to the World Series. He throws out. If you look at the pictures of October 1950, he went down to Philadelphia, and he introduces the wife to the crowds, and everyone's cheering. October 7th, 1950. The wife is introduced, and they're throwing out, but he still keeps his relationship with her different. You know, with her, he compartmentalizes, and they finally end up at a wedding where nobody's invited except the doctor and 2 or 3 friends, House, Grace, and William Henderson. All the people from the South. You know, she comes from the South, very comfortable. And her mother gives her mother, his mother-in-law, the president's mother-in-law, gives them away, you know, holds them. And they go on a private wedding to Virginia. They take a private car. And why am I bringing this up? I don't know. I'm bringing it up partly because how rejuvenated he was. When they go out golfing, he's dancing. He's playing the ape with his golf clubs to her. You know, he's golfing. He's acting like a kid. And the notification from the Secret Service, he was like a wild kid. His whole world changed. And the night they went on their honeymoon, they were in a Coleman car. Stalin, who's the white Secret Service guy, followed them around, says, he comes out of there and he says, whoopity day. He's like, you know, this is the day I've been waiting for 16, 17 months. I mean, the guy is like a little kid. He's the president of the United States, and the world is falling. But that moment in 1950, he's like a little kid. You know, you can't, you know what they say, you can't love somebody until you love yourself. Well, that was basically it with him. He needed a woman in order to get out to the world. He would have been very happy to give up the presidency after his wife died. I mean, he would have been happy. He would have been resigned to him. I don't think he would have run for president in 1916 if it wasn't for her. His whole life changed from that. Where it was a miserable relationship living in the White House, he now felt happy again. I told you before, when his first wife died, he was a very happy man in the White House. And so many things occurred in that first year of his presidency domestically. But now, he still doesn't expect to get reelected. Because I told you, in 1912, basically this country, the South, was solidly Democratic. But other than the South, there was a Republican majority outside the South. And the Bull Moose Party and the Republican Party split, and Wilson got elected in 1912, 1913. But by 1916, they had one man running against him, Charles Evans Hughes. And it was expected that Hughes would beat Wilson in 1960, that Wilson would not win. And he went to bed that night, expecting, getting their returns, and they came out against Wilson. and it looked like he was going to lose the election. He went to bed. I couldn't teach the people. Couldn't teach the people enough. I really don't feel ashamed. I got my new wife. I'm willing to accept it. He went to bed at 7, 8 o'clock. 10 o'clock at night, and he said, "Don't disturb me until the morning. I don't want to. I know I'm probably not reelected." Well, the election ended up in California. California's further west. In California, the cities went for the Republicans. And it looked like he was going to lose, that Wilson was, Charles Evans Hughes, and the guy, well, just like that. Charles Evans Hughes went to bed that night also saying, "Don't wake me up, I'll be," and he said, "Okay, Mr. President," because the results were coming in that he was going to lose. The rural towns, the last people to show up by a margin, slim margin, in California, voted for Wilson. And he eked out a re-election victory in 1960. It was basically a country at that time which, other than the South, which was unified, was basically a Republican country. Republicans were very popular outside the South, but they didn't get, he was the president. And the main thing that got him reelected was what? Because he didn't have a German U-boat commander firing away at the time on an American ship. He took the credit for it, even though he was very lucky at that time, because the United States was not at war. The whole European world was at war, but he won the election because of one statement. He kept us out of war. He kept us out of war, and he was trying to keep us out of war. But as I said, if a German U-boat captain had fired an American ship, as it did in Lusitania got sunk, we probably would have been in war. Or maybe we wouldn't, but Wilson wanted to avoid war. He had grown up, as I told you, he had grown up seeing the ravages of Sherman's march through Georgia. He had hated the desolation of war. And by the way, he had one incident in his first year of his presidency, where there was an invasion of Mexico, and American in Veracruz, Mexico, and about maybe 100 GIs or 25 GIs to 100 GIs got killed. He was white. He was shaken by that. He says, we ended up trying to be strong in Mexico. I got it. And, he was shaken by that. He was shaken by the Georgia march, by the Confederacy. He had grown up in the South. His wife had been the same. She had a terrible childhood, his second wife, as well as his first wife. He was fortunate enough, as I said before, to be married, to be a son of an Episcopalian minister. And the ministers were generally were safe from, at least they had a secure salary. But there were a lot of people that were in very bad shape in the South from the war. And he says, the one thing I want to do is keep us out of war. But now, he's president, and the sinking of Lusitania comes about, and he feels, now he's studying the causes of World War I. And we are out of it. And I'm not going to talk about it now, but he grew the first 21st century Army and Navy. World War I, before World War I, maybe the Civil War with Grant, the last year of Grant was like the 21st century, the devastation. With Grant willing to sacrifice people. But in the 21st century,
You mean 20th century?
the 20th century, the 19th century, 20th century, there was a world unit. But I want you to know, as you probably know, if you know anything about World War I, We never developed the planes for World War I. We never developed the tanks for World War I. We sent 1 million people over there, but we didn't have the deployment as we did in World War II. We didn't have the deployment. Wilson had to do a lot of work. And where he worked 4 or 5 hours a day in his first year of his presidency, now he was working 17, 18 hours a day. He had his wife behind him, and he could keep working, but he was devastated by this war. And then Lusitania came about. And with Lusitania, he went to the Congress. I told you I have been relying in large part, not exclusively obviously, but in large part on this book I mentioned, Gene Smith's book. And I just wanted to make sure I got it right, so I had one. I see if I can give you the speech. He goes to the House of Representatives on a rainy day in April, let me see if I can. Just give me a second. April 1917, April 9th. I did He made up his mind to declare war. He made up his mind that the country could not tolerate, the world could not tolerate the United States standing out of war. He did this. You know how Lincoln went to war to bring the states back? And then later on, 3 years later, he went to Gettysburg Address. And so we're fighting for a higher cause than just to bring the states back. We're fighting for the rights of man, that these men. Wilson had imbibed that and said, we're not fighting for territory. We're not fighting to keep the United States intact, because the United States was intact. He just won re-election. We're doing this. We had to create like Lincoln did. Lincoln did it non-politically. Lincoln did it idealistically. So did Wilson. Wilson said, why are these men dying in Europe? There's got to be a greater cause. And this is what he said. It is a fearful thing to the Congress. It is a fearful thing to lead this great peaceful people into war. It is the most terrible and disastrous of all wars. Civilization itself seeming to be in the balance, but right is more precious than peace. Right is more precious than peace. What is the right? What is the right? He created his mind. The right being to end all wars. And that's unrealistic. But that's what he said to himself, and that's what he believed, and that's what the people started to believe. And then he says, and we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest our hearts. For democracy, for the right of those who submit to authority to have a voice in their governments. For the rights and liberties of small nations. For a universal dominion of right by such a concert of free peoples as shall bring safe, peace, and safety to all nations and make the world itself at last free. And this went over so well because the people believed that we, the people of the United States, could lead the world. Look at how wonderful we lived in this world for 200 years without going to war with a foreign country. And we could do the same thing over there. And then he says, to such a task we can dedicate our lives and our fortunes, everything that we are and everything that we have, with the pride of those who know that the day has come when America is privileged to spend her blood and her might for the principles that gave her birth and happiness and the peace which she has treasured. There was a moment of silence. Then a great roar of applause rolled up to him. And he knew he carried the day. And we went. Unified. Republicans, Democrats, the United States. To Wilson's message, people did not analyze. They weren't looking at that time to criticize him. We were sending men over. That you voted to go to war. And this country that for 200 years had basically said, stay away from Europe, went in with this speech. It carried the day. It carried, I'm saying that.
How much of his entrance into World War I was caused by his not understanding the unrestricted submarine warfare?
Yeah.
Rather than his ideals.
A lot of it, you're right, it was a fact that he'd been fortunate. The Germans, the Germans had plans in 1914 to attack the United States. If you look at the World War I, he was just fortunate enough that they didn't do that. They had Germany had brought England into the war unnecessarily by going through Belgium, and Germany it was vying with England over the seas. There was a great luck in America that we weren't attacked. Wilson Wilson didn't have that. He did worry about the Navy. He got Sims over and others to try to reorganize the Navy, and he was always worried that there would be an attack on the submarine, with the submarines. But years went by. It wasn't until 1917. The war had gone on from 1914, but the United States was attacked on the seas. So, it's like if you see every day, going through every day, and every day you're not getting attacked, you begin to think that's going to be a standard position. That he was ignorant of the he did reorganize, but he was basically ignorant of it. You're right. Okay, so we went to France. Jack Pershing led the troops. Wilson spending many hours, he handled the war adeptly after we got in. Millions of GIs were sent to France, and the war went on. Now you have to recall that 3 years the war was waging. 2.5, it was now almost 3 years. So 3 years. Germany was getting tired of fighting. France was getting decimated. Germany invaded France completely. French were looking for a hero. Pershing was a hero on the American Expeditionary Force. And many Americans went to battle, dying because of Woodrow Wilson's words. Believing in Woodrow Wilson's words. They wouldn't have gone over there and died. There was a way about the American soldier in World War I that had an air of confidence, unlike the German and French soldiers who had been fighting for 3 years, who were wearied out. The American GIs were Yankee Doodle. They were willing to give their lives for a higher cause. And they had to. When they saw their blood, they were saying, we're not fighting for territory. We're fighting for an ideal. And it was contagious. It was contagious among the other soldiers of the world. And And Wilson, you remember I told you about Wilson? He didn't confer. He was not the type of guy with the legislation. He would announce, he would dictate, he would make a statement. This is the way it is. I'm not going to compromise with you. He had a one-track mind, Wilson. When he was in politics, he had a one-track mind. He wouldn't negotiate politics. All those things that were passed in 1913 were done with 3 hours of work a day. You do it. And he was fortunate enough, as I told you last week, to be at a time when the nation was willing to be progressive in 1913 and 1914. And was willing to pass this legislation, but he didn't work very hard. He always had the belief that he was morally superior to his adversaries, that he was like the school teacher that he was, that he was talking to the misbehaving students. He was that way when he ran for president. He was that way when he ran for re-election. He was detached about his, and he got elected because he was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. But he also, now he was president, he kept us out of war in 1960. Now he goes into it. He now adopts the attitude that we got to go into it to save mankind and the people, the GI. If you have somebody who went to war in World War I, most of those GIs were very idealistic. They were going to fight to save humanity. They were going to send a message to the world. That's what they died for, in many ways. And we had a lot.
At the beginning of, when America first went into the war, I think Germany did not have a lot of respect for what America would be able to put forth. They saw them as being somewhat important, but they didn't feel it was going to be the overwhelming tide. But what happened was, it wasn't just the millions of people, it started earlier, and once they started sending the overwhelming numbers, and more than that, the manufacturing of war materials that supported the men, Germany, and especially with how they did in the Argonne Forest and turning the tide of war, because Europe was a mess. And America coming into it realized, again, the same thing as World War II, that they didn't get into it. Germany was going to win this war. But once Germany realized the extent of America's involvement and what it would mean, they realized it was the beginning of the end.
Right. Right. I appreciate that. You're right. But there was a combination of factors. One of them is that the United States was the infusion of oxygen to people that were not getting oxygen. Like you said, the U.S. came in at the right time. Came in 1917 when the people were weary of war, were fighting it. Weary. And all of a sudden, a new fresh force comes in, singing Yankee Doodle Dandy and believing in it. And many men were maimed. Many men. But the war ended. Why? Partly for that reason, because Germany, you said it, you said that the Germany basically saw this infusion of people coming in. Also, fortunately for the Allies, Russia became a communist country. The Bolshevik Revolution. And Russia, in 1917, with its communist Bolshevism, they were against the war, basically. So we had the combination of Russia defecting. So the people on Russia's side were France and England. They said, we're not going to get what we want. Yet we are going to get. We're going to get something. We're going to get back Germany. Alsace-Lorraine was taken from us by Germany. We're going to get that back. But these alliances between France and Russia and all they said, they still kept going. There was secret pacts going on. Wilson, I told you, his defect was also his strength. He didn't believe that people should secretly compromise, have negotiations, have alliances. And the alliances caused World War I. If you stand up on a mount like Jesus did, forgive me, I'm not criticizing Jesus, but I'm trying to say, he was like Jesus. He was put in a position in this world, in the 20th century. No one was like a world messiah since Jesus, as Woodrow Wilson happened to be, because he was in the right place at the right time with the mentality that right makes, that I can impose beauty on the world. And the people were so devastated by this war that they were willing to accept it, even though in their hearts they knew that deep down they were going to fight forever, if they could fight forever. But Wilson gave them a way out. And the German soldiers and the Austrian soldiers that were losing this war said, Wilson doesn't want to take advantage of us. The French do. The British do. They have these secret pacts, these secret alliances. They want to destroy us. But here's an outsider coming in, telling France, telling Britain, you can't have it your way. We're not doing it so that when Germany gets defeated, now you become the new Germany by taking over German territory. So Wilson talked to the victors and told the victors, and he talked to the world and said, the victors, you can't have it. I have to have a new world order, and you have to give in. And France and England were so worried about the deaths that were going on that they kowtowed to Wilson. And the armistice, and Germany said if it wasn't for Wilson's statement, we would have gone on fighting for another year. Another 100,000 GIs would have been, or 200,000, or 2 million, who knows, GIs would have been killed. But because Wilson came in at the right time and he said, I'm acting alone, I'm not acting with Britain, I'm not acting with France, I'm acting alone for the victor and the vanquished, for the poor little nation. You know, I'll give you just an example, and I will finish. Poland was formed out of World War I. But the problem with Poland is that there's a whole bunch of nationalities within Poland. You know, many of you people probably come from Poland. In Poland, which was formed through Wilson, but Wilson had also believed that everybody should have their own self-determination. Host of problems come up. Do I have any more minutes?
Yeah, about 4.
Okay. Any questions? What I'm trying to say is the world looked at this guy. When the armistice was signed on November 11th, stopped World War I, cold. Wilson takes a trip by boat on the George Washington at this battleship to Europe. He tells the country, I got one thing on my mind. World peace. Don't bother me with domestic problems unless it's an emergency. I'm going over there. He goes to France. He leaves December 4th, 1917. He gets there. Now, the armistice was signed November 11th. He leaves December 4th. He gets to, it's a slow trip, he gets to Brest. Is it pronounced Brest, B-R-E-S-T? Brest, France. You can't believe December 13th. You cannot believe the world, the whole people of France, more people saw him in Brest, France. They traveled down from all over France to see the Savior. He saved us from war. Now, what did I talk about when I started this book? What's the headline? When the cheering started. Now, just before that happened, I got 2 minutes? Just before that happened, in November 1918, November 11th, right? There was an armistice in the world. Loved Wilson. But does anybody know what happens on November 4th? In the years with the November 4th, what happens every November 4th, November 5th? No. Right.
What?
What?
Election day wasn't.
Yeah, but it's every 2 years, you know. And there's a Congress. And what is this Wilson? He's got the whole world behind him. He's got his people behind him. He's got the country of the United States behind him. But he makes a stupid statement. Well, it wasn't so stupid. It was a political statement. But it would be done. But you've got the whole world looking, and you're about to end the war, and the whole world is looking to you. Why did he have to? You remember, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party united to fight this war. There was a unison of support domestically to get us into war. In April 1917, in November, remember, he's not interested in domestic politics now, he's interested in the world. He opens up his big mouth and says, you gotta vote, you elect a Democratic Congress. I'm a Democrat. You gotta elect a Democratic Congress because the Republicans are not going to support me. And if you elect a Republican, you know how to say it? It was boomerang. And just before he goes there, the Republican Party takes the House, takes the Senate, because of that comment that he made, because all the Republicans said, what kind of an ingrate is he? We sacrificed ourselves for this. And Teddy Roosevelt was very upset over this, right? Teddy Roosevelt was very upset. The whole country threw him out. Didn't throw him out, he had 4 years. Didn't give him the endorsement. They voted because of what? And then he goes over to Europe. But the whole world loves him except the people in the United States because of what he did. And believe me, that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay. Good?
100 years, same thing.
Good to see you.
Same thing's gonna happen.
So they realized that this was
Did you see this one about him in the baby?
I think he's asking for another
You
hug.
know what, you gotta
Mia.
get that away, or else she's gonna...
Mia, I think he's asking for another hug.
He wants another
He
hug?
wants another hug.
Andrew, you want so many
He
hugs.
wants another hug.
Yeah, you want another hug from me?
Oh, easy though, okay?
Don't squeeze
Oh, okay, don't squeeze.
Okay.
Because he's a baby.
Kind of got that.
Look, you made him happy.
Hey!
Oh.
Do you like the way you look?
Oh.
What do you look like? Papa, get anything?
What does Pop Pop get? Oh, he wants to go back. Oh.
No! No! Nothing for Papa?
But then Papa's gonna cry. You don't wanna hear Papa cry.
No cry.
But he's gonna cry. You gotta give him a hug or he'll cry.
My baby. Oh. Okay.
Again?
You're hugging Grandma? And not Papa? Whoops. You love that Grandma, huh?
If you don't give Papa
You want Papa to come over?
or he'll cry.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna cry.
Oh.
He's gonna cry.
I'll
No
try
crying.
not to, but I need you.
Go ahead, give him a hug before he cries. He's gonna cry.
Hurry
He's
up,
gonna
Mom, he's
cry. Hurry.
Okay, Papa's okay. Papa's
You're
okay.
fine.
She does. She's very sympathetic, so I don't like to make her upset.
Okay.
Oh, what happened to
Tell
Andrew?
Andrew.